Welcome to Anatomy of the Extraordinary, the podcast that unveils true, remarkable stories from the edges of human experience. I'm your host, and today we dive into another extraordinary journey.
So, if we go back to December 2001, there's this company that reported a quarterly net profit of exactly $5 million.
Right. Which, if you actually divide that by their outstanding shares at the time, it comes out to exactly 1 single penny per share.
1 penny. I mean, by traditional Wall Street metrics, a penny it's a rounding error. It's a statistical anomaly.
Yeah, completely insignificant usually.
But in the context of this specific company, that single penny triggered a 40% stock surge.
Oh, yeah. Because it essentially saved a business that was on the absolute brink of bankruptcy.
Exactly. And it laid the foundation for what is now basically a global empire worth nearly $2 trillion.
It is arguably the most important single cent ever generated in the history of modern commerce.
Yeah.
Because that penny, it didn't just represent money, it represented proof of concept.
Right. It proved that the most audacious, cash-burning, high-risk bet in the history of retail wasn't just a hallucination. So today, we are tearing the casing off the Amazon machine. And I want you, the listener, to think about the last time you bought something online.
You probably didn't think about the logistics at all.
No, of course not. You just, clicked a button and 2 days later, a cardboard box with a little smile on the side materialized on your doorstep.
It feels like magic.
It totally does. But it's not magic. It is an unbelievably vast, complex, algorithm-driven Leviathan.
And our mission for this deep dive is to decode all of it. We have a massive stack of sources today. It's this comprehensive 4-part historical and biographical account of the rise of Amazon and its founder, Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, and we really want to figure out how a young 30-year-old Wall Street quantitative analyst managed to turn a money-losing online bookstore into a massive personal fortune.
And, well, how he built an infrastructure that basically dictates modern commerce, technology, and even entertainment.
But let's set the tone right off the bat because the sources make it very clear. This is not just some standard, dry corporate history.
No, absolutely not. You aren't going to just hear about quarterly earnings here.
Right. This is a story about relentless, almost terrifying ambition. It's about a man who essentially weaponized mathematics to conquer the physical world.
It's full of spectacular failures, cutthroat negotiations, and the creation of an empire that is largely run by artificial intelligence now.
Which is why I think we have to start by understanding the specific environment that wired his brain. Because we are not starting in a dusty garage in Silicon Valley.
Right, the classic tech myth. But no, we are starting in the spring of 1994 in the pristine, intensely quiet, all-white offices of the D.E. Shaw hedge fund in New York City.
And this detail is crucial. D.E. Shaw wasn't just any Wall Street firm. It was the absolute bleeding edge of quantitative finance.
Exactly. The founder, David E. Shaw, he was a former Columbia University computer science professor.
So he wasn't hiring traditional stockbrokers.
No, he wasn't hiring guys who looked at company balance sheets or read the financial news to make gut-feeling trades. He was hiring brilliant computer scientists, physicists, mathematicians.
Because their whole goal was statistical arbitrage. They were building complex algorithms to detect these microscopic anomalies in stock prices and then execute trades in fractions of a second.
So it's an incredibly analytical, heavily data-driven environment. Everything is a math problem waiting to be solved.
And Bezos is thriving here. I mean, he's only 30 years old, and he's already a senior vice president. He is a wonderkind.
Totally.
But then one day, he gets an assignment from his boss to investigate commercial opportunities on this obscure new academic network called the World Wide Web.
And what he finds completely short-circuits his brain.
Oh, yeah. He uncovers a statistic that basically alters the trajectory of global commerce.
He finds that web usage, like the sheer volume of data being transferred, is growing at 2,300% a year.
2,300%. I mean, when I read that in the source material, I had to stop and really think about what that means mathematically.
Exponential.
Right. He actually marches into his boss's office and compares it to bacteria growing in a Petri dish. He realizes that this isn't just a consumer trend, like, a new fashion fad.
And because he is a quantitative analyst, he understands the physics of an exponential curve.
Right, like if you plant a seed in soil that is expanding by 2,300% a year, your seed doesn't even have to be that genetically superior.
No, the sheer velocity of the expanding environment will carry it upward.
The underlying mathematical reality of that growth rate is what hooked him.
He wasn't necessarily, a visionary about the social or cultural impact of the internet at that exact moment. He was just a numbers guy looking at an irresistible math equation.
So the question simply became, what is the optimal product to inject into this rapidly expanding environment?
And he lands on books.
Which, sounds almost quaint now. Like, out of everything you could sell on this futuristic network, why books? Was it a passion project?
Not at all. It was purely logical. It wasn't born out of some romantic love for literature, although he was a voracious science fiction reader.
Sure.
But it was a cold, data-driven decision. If you look at the landscape of retail at the time, books offered a really unique set of advantages for early e-commerce.
Okay, let's break that down.
First, there was the sheer volume of inventory. There were over 3 million active books in print worldwide in 1994.
Right, and physical stores have severe geometric limitations. Like, even a massive superstore can only stock about 150,000 titles.
Precisely. So, immediately, the internet offers a value proposition that physical retail mathematically cannot match. Infinite shelf space.
You don't have to choose which books to carry. You can literally offer all of them.
Exactly. But the second reason is even more important from a computer science perspective. Books are universally cataloged.
Ah, the ISBN.
Yes, the International Standard Book Number. Every single book published has a unique numerical identifier.
Meaning the data is perfectly, beautifully structured for a computer database.
You don't have to teach a 1994-era computer what a book is or how to categorize it by color or size. You just feed it the ISBN registry.
The product data was already digitized and standardized globally. That's huge.
And third, from a logistical standpoint, they are incredibly robust. They are easy to pack, they don't spoil like food, they don't shatter like glass.
And they have relatively uniform rectangular shapes. They were the perfect Petri dish experiment for e-commerce.
But wait, I want to interject here because if I'm his boss at the hedge fund, I'm saying, Jeff, this is a neat thought experiment, but we are Wall Street bankers. We are not librarians. You are making massive bonuses. Just keep your high-paying job.
And that exact conversation happened. The sources say his boss took him for a walk in Central Park and essentially told him exactly that.
Right. This is a good idea, but it would be a better idea for someone who didn't already have a great job.
Which forces Bezos into a corner. He has to make a decision. And the way he makes this decision gives us our first real look into his unique psychological makeup.
He develops what he calls his regret minimization framework.
I found this absolutely fascinating in the sources. He sits down and literally makes a pros and cons list, but he completely shifts the temporal perspective.
Yeah, he realized that if he looked at the decision from the perspective of a 30-year-old in 1994, the cons list was overwhelming. I mean, tangible, massive risks.
He'd be risking his entire life savings.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be walking away from a guaranteed, lucrative Wall Street career.
And he'd be risking public humiliation if the startup failed.
Well, a pros list is entirely theoretical at that point.
Exactly. So he projects himself forward in time. He imagines he is 80 years old, sitting on a porch, looking back at his life.
Okay.
And he asks himself, when I am 80, will I regret walking away from my 1994 Wall Street bonus?
And the answer was no. He probably wouldn't even remember the bonus.
Right. But then he asks, will I regret entirely missing out on the internet? A phenomenon I know in my bones is going to be the biggest technological revolution of my lifetime.
And the answer to that was a resounding yes. He realized the psychological weight of inaction would haunt him far more than the sting of failure.
Regret minimization wins. So he quits.
Which leads to this incredibly vivid image from the sources. Summer of 1994, Jeff and his wife, Mackenzie, pack up their life. They hire movers, tell them to literally just drive west.
Which is wild.
Yeah, they say they will call them from the road with a final destination.
It is the ultimate quantitative road trip. You have Mackenzie driving their boxy Chevy Blazer, and Jeff is in the passenger seat with a thick, heavy 1990s laptop.
Crunching numbers on an Excel spreadsheet to optimize their future location based on 3 distinct variables.
Okay, let's break down these variables because it really proves he was building a massive machine from day one, not just a mom and pop shop. What was variable number 1?
Taxation, specifically the 1992 Supreme Court ruling on mail order businesses.
Right. At the time, a mail order business only had to collect sales tax from customers who lived in the same state where the business had a physical presence, which is known as a nexus.
So if he headquartered in a massive state like California or New York, he'd have to charge sales tax to a huge portion of his potential customer base.
He needed a state with a relatively small population to ensure that the vast majority of the country could buy from him tax-free.
Instantly giving him a permanent price advantage over local physical bookstores.
Is sneaky, but from a business perspective, incredibly strategic. What was the second variable?
Distribution. He knows he can't actually hold 3 million physical books himself. He doesn't have the capital.
So he needs to be geographically close to someone who does.
Right. Ingram, which was one of the nation's largest book wholesalers, had a massive depot in Roseburg, Oregon. He needed to be within a day's driving distance of that depot so he could order books from them and ship them out quickly.
And the third variable?
Tech talent. He needs a pool of brilliant software engineers to build the actual infrastructure.
So the spreadsheet crunches the population data, the geographical data, and the labor market data, and it spits out the perfect nexus. Seattle, Washington.
It has a small state population. It's just north of the Enneagram Depot in Oregon. And because Microsoft is headquartered right there in Redmond, the area is crawling with top-tier programmers.
It was a mathematically derived destination.
Completely. So they arrive, rent a house in a Seattle suburb, and set up the company in the garage.
The classic tech startup mythos. But it's very real here.
The sources describe extension cords running everywhere, a space heater blowing to keep them warm because, it's Seattle.
Right.
Mackenzie is sitting there reading an Accounting for Dummies type book to handle the finances, and Jeff hires their first true programmer, a guy named Shel Kafan, who was a veteran of the Silicon Valley scene.
But the first major crisis they hit is branding.
Yes, because Bezos' original name for the company was Cadabra.
As in the magic word abracadabra. He wanted the e-commerce experience to feel magical.
But Shel Kafan and a lawyer point out a massive phonetic flaw. When you say Cadabra over a crackly 1994 telephone line,
It sounds exactly like cadaver.
dead body bookstore. Not exactly the welcoming vibe you want for a retail revolution.
No, it was a terrible brand image. So Bezos literally pulls a physical dictionary off his shelf and starts systematically flipping through the A section.
And we have to remember the context of the early web here. In 1994, internet directories like Yahoo often listed websites alphabetically. Starting with the letter A was crucial for search visibility.
And he hits the word Amazon, the Amazon River.
It is the largest river in the world, not just by a little bit, but by a massive, overwhelming margin. It contains more water than the next 7 largest rivers combined.
Bezos looked at that definition and realized the metaphor was perfect. He didn't want to build a bookstore. He wanted to build the largest, most unstoppable current of commerce in the world.
And so Amazon.com was born. Right out of the gate, they started introducing features that today you and I take entirely for granted.
But back then, they were radical.
The virtual shopping cart, obviously.
Yeah.
But the one that really caused friction was the introduction of customer reviews.
Yeah, the customer review system is a perfect illustration of Bezos' long-term thinking, clashing with short-term retail logic.
Right.
If you are a traditional retailer in the 90s, your fundamental goal is to sell the product you have sitting on your physical shelf.
So if someone writes a terrible review of a book, traditional retail logic dictates that you hide that review because it will hurt sales.
I mean, publishers were furious. Why would you build a platform that allows a customer to talk another customer out of buying your product?
But Bezos understood something profound about the architecture of the internet. It wasn't just a digital catalog. It was a networked community.
By allowing and even encouraging negative reviews, he was building long-term trust.
He explicitly told his team that Amazon shouldn't be in the business of selling things. It should be in the business of helping customers decide what to buy.
He calculated that if a customer trusts the platform to be radically honest, they will inevitably return.
He was sacrificing a single short-term sale to secure a lifetime customer. It was essentially an early form of social media for consumers.
And the strategy works. The site goes live in July 1995, and the growth is immediate.
Soon after, they get an email from David Philo, one of the founders of Yahoo. And at this specific moment in internet history, Yahoo essentially is the front page of the internet.
Yeah, they are the gatekeepers.
Fila says, hey, we love what you guys are doing. We're going to feature Amazon on our What's Cool page.
Which is the mid-90s equivalent of being featured on the Super Bowl broadcast. It unleashes a fire hose of traffic.
And it completely overwhelms them. The sources describe total chaos. They don't have a sophisticated warehouse yet.
When an order comes in, they literally buy the book from the Enneagram wholesaler, have it shipped to their tiny office, physically unpack it on the floor, put it in an Amazon box, and take it to the post office.
Bezos himself is down on his hands and knees on the concrete floor, packing boxes late into the night.
He even famously suggests they should buy knee pads, to which an employee replies, Jeff, we don't need knee pads, we need packing tables.
I love that quote. It just highlights the scrappy reality of early hypergrowth.
But the demand curve was undeniably validating his initial 2,300% thesis.
To sustain this, however, he needed capital. Massive amounts of it.
So Bezos pivots back to the world he left behind. He goes back to Wall Street to pitch venture capitalists and investors.
But his pitch is completely, utterly audacious.
Wait, I have to stop you there because the math of this pitch simply doesn't make sense to me. He is demanding a $200 million valuation for Amazon. But the company hasn't made a single cent in profit.
Right.
In fact, he explicitly tells investors, we don't want to make a profit. How did he look rational Wall Street bankers in the eye, ask for millions of dollars, and convince them to ignore centuries of basic accounting rules?
Because borrowing capital to sell books at a loss isn't a business strategy, it's financial suicide.
It sounds like financial suicide if you are operating under the rules of linear physical retail. But Bezos was pitching a completely different economic theory.
He introduced his core operating philosophy for this era: get big fast.
His argument to the bankers was this. The internet is an unrepeatable land grab. It is an entirely new frontier.
If we focus on showing a tiny quarterly profit right now, we will be starved of the capital needed to capture the market share. Someone else will take it.
So he's essentially saying customer acquisition is more important than immediate margins.
Exactly. He argued that they must spend every single dollar they make and every single dollar they can raise to aggressively acquire customers and build digital and physical infrastructure.
You sell a book at a loss if you have to, just to get the customer to input their credit card and build the habit of shopping on Amazon.
Because once you achieve absolute undisputed scale, once you are the default infrastructure for online shopping, the profits will inevitably follow because of the lifetime value of those locked-in customers.
It's an incredible gamble. It's like a city planner building a massive 10-lane superhighway system in the middle of an absolute desert.
Pouring billions into the concrete.
Right, and just betting everything that a metropolis will eventually spring up around it because the road is so good.
That is the perfect analogy. He is building the infrastructure for a future reality that only he can clearly visualize.
And to build that physical highway, he does something very smart. He doesn't hire tech guys to run his physical operations.
He hires a guy named Jimmy Wright, who was a veteran logistics chief from Walmart.
Because Bezos knows that if his digital storefront is going to offer infinite selection, he needs world-class physical warehouses to fulfill that promise.
Wright comes in, and Bezos gives him this mandate that sounds like an absolute fever dream. He calls it Project Alexandria.
Oh, this is wild.
He tells Wright, I want Amazon to hold 2 physical copies of every single book ever printed in human history, just like the ancient library of Alexandria.
And Wright, who comes from the highly disciplined, penny-pinching, cost-controlled world of Walmart, looks at him like he's lost his mind.
Because logically, it makes zero financial sense. Storing millions of obscure, out-of-print books that might statistically sell once every 10 years is a massive, unjustifiable drain on capital.
It costs money to heat and cool that space.
But it perfectly illustrates Bezos' absolute obsession with the concept of selection. He wanted Amazon to be the everything store from day one.
Project Alexandria was eventually scrapped because the management team vehemently fought back. It was just too ruinously expensive. But it shows the sheer scale of his ambition.
They do, however, build massive, highly advanced distribution centers across the country. They expand into Europe, they start selling CDs, DVDs, and eventually toys.
The stock goes public in 1997 and absolutely skyrockets. By 1999, Time magazine names Jeff Bezos the person of the year. He is the undisputed king of e-commerce.
He's on top of the world. But then we flip the calendar to the year 2000. and the entire 10-lane highway collapses. The dot-com bubble bursts.
It is a total bloodbath across the tech sector. The macroeconomic conditions shift violently.
The Federal Reserve begins raising interest rates, making capital more expensive.
The massive Y2K scare passes without any catastrophic computer failures, leading to a massive sudden drop in corporate tech spending.
And suddenly, Wall Street investors wake up from their euphoria and realize they have poured billions of dollars into internet companies that have literally no underlying business models.
And Amazon, the poster child for get big fast, is caught right in the center of the crosshairs. The stock free falls.
It drops from a high of $107 a share all the way down to $15.
Wall Street analysts are openly mocking them. One famous analyst report is literally titled, "Bedtime for Bezos."
They look at Amazon and they don't see a visionary infrastructure company. They see a massive, out-of-control furnace burning through investor cash.
The financial realities finally caught up with the narrative. Amazon had borrowed $2 billion to fund its hyper-expansion and build those massive warehouses.
And they were losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year operating them.
The chief financial officer at the time, a brilliant executive named Joy Covey, runs the actuarial numbers and presents a terrifying reality to the board.
She explains that if the stock price remains depressed and they can no longer issue cheap equity to raise capital, their massive debt obligations will crush them.
They will literally run out of money and go bankrupt within a matter of months.
So Bezos is forced to face his executive team, and he completely, instantaneously flips the script.
The same guy who preached get big fast for the last 5 years walks into the room and says, get big fast is dead. Our new operating motto is get the C-ARP out.
And CRECROP in this specific corporate context is an acronym. It stands for Can't Realize a Profit.
If an item costs more to store and ship than it generates in margin, kill it. Stop selling it.
He sets an impossible new goal. Amazon must show a true JAP-certified net profit within 18 months.
The clock is ticking down to the end of 2001.
This represents a massive pivot in corporate psychology, and it requires brutal internal austerity. Bezos institutes sweeping cuts.
He fires 15% of the total workforce. He shutters one of those massive, expensive new distribution centers.
He entirely eliminates the marketing department, arguing that if the customer experience is good enough, they shouldn't need to buy ads.
He even notoriously cancels the free aspirin and pain relievers for employees in the break rooms.
Which, according to the sources, sparked massive internal protests. People were furious. But it shows how deeply, almost obsessively, he was cutting operational costs.
Yet, cutting costs isn't enough to reach profitability. You can't shrink your way to success.
Right. He needs massive revenue, but he literally doesn't have the cash to buy the inventory required to generate that revenue.
And this paradox leads to what might be the single most brilliant, ruthless, and industry-defining business meeting in modern history, the Toys R Us deal.
This is a masterstroke of strategic opportunism, and it is the foundation of the Amazon we know today. Let's analyze the leverage in play.
Okay.
Amazon is struggling financially, but Toys R Us, which at the time is the absolute, undisputed heavyweight champion of the global toy industry, is also struggling. Just in a completely different domain.
Right. Let's set the scene for the listener. Bezos flies out to meet John Eyler, the CEO of Toys R Us, and they both come to the table with massive bleeding pain points.
Amazon has these huge, state-of-the-art warehouses sitting half empty because they had to slash their inventory purchasing.
Furthermore, they had lost tens of millions of dollars the previous Christmas on unsold toys, because predicting toy trends is incredibly difficult if you don't have deep industry expertise.
But Toys R Us has the exact opposite problem. They have incredible inventory, deep, decades-long supplier relationships with companies like Hasbro and Mattel, and massive buying power to get the best prices.
But their digital infrastructure is an absolute disaster.
They had failed miserably in delivering toys on time the previous Christmas, resulting in terrible PR, angry parents, and crying kids.
They didn't understand the complex logistics of picking, packing, and shipping single items to residential addresses.
So Bezos looks at Eyler and says, let's team up. Let's integrate. You handle what you're good at. You do the toy buying, you negotiate with the suppliers, and you physically own the inventory.
And we will handle what we are good at. The website interface, the digital shopping cart, the server uptime, and the warehouse logistics.
We'll list your toys on Amazon.com. We will pick them, pack them, and ship them, and we will simply take a percentage commission on every sale.
For Toys R Us, this seems like an absolute godsend. It's a win-win.
They get out of the messy, highly technical business of web development and residential logistics, and they get immediate access to Amazon's massive, growing customer base without having to build it themselves.
But Bezos insists on two crucial, non-negotiable conditions before signing.
First, he demands an ironclad 10-year contract.
Second, and far more importantly, he insists that while Toys R Us will be the exclusive toy seller on the platform, Amazon is legally free to invite other third-party sellers onto the platform for different retail categories.
And this seemingly innocuous clause is the birth of the Amazon marketplace.
The ability for independent third-party sellers to list their products directly alongside Amazon's own inventory.
Exactly. What John Eiler and the Toys R Us executives didn't fully grasp in that boardroom was the long-term implication of platform economics versus linear retail.
I need you to break that down for me because this is the pivot that changes everything. What do you mean by platform economics?
Are you saying Bezos essentially turned his biggest toy competitor into a Trojan horse to build the infrastructure for his own third-party empire?
That is precisely what he did, and understanding this economic shift is crucial.
In linear retail, which is how Walmart or the old Amazon operated, you buy a product from a supplier, you hold it in your warehouse, and you sell it to a customer.
You take all the inventory risk. If the product doesn't sell, you take the loss.
But in platform economics, you don't buy the product. You simply provide the digital marketplace and the physical delivery network, and you connect the third-party seller with the buyer.
You take a guaranteed cut of the transaction with zero inventory risk.
So by signing the Toys R Us deal, Bezos used his competitor's massive inventory and brand name to train his own algorithms, train his warehouse workers on how to handle third-party logistics, and most importantly, train the American consumer to buy third-party goods on Amazon.com.
He effectively subsidized the multi-billion-dollar creation of the Amazon marketplace using Toys R Us money.
It solved his short-term cash flow problem because he was earning massive commissions without spending a dime on inventory.
But long-term, it transformed Amazon from a store that sells things into an underlying utility platform that takes a tax on a massive chunk of the global economy.
And once you are the platform, your marginal cost of adding a new seller is basically zero, but your revenue scales infinitely.
It is ruthless structural genius, and it saves them.
We cut to late December 2001. The 18-month deadline is up. Midnight. The executive team is huddled around a computer in Seattle, eating cold pizza, desperately waiting for the final fourth quarter numbers from the accountants.
They need to show a profit to survive the dot-com crash.
The numbers finally populate on the screen. The quarterly revenues are $3.1 billion, and the net profit, $5 million.
Which, as we said at the start, equals exactly 1 penny per share.
1 penny. But as Bezos reportedly said in that room, it was the most important cent in the world.
Because it proves to Wall Street that the underlying machine actually works. The stock jumps 40%.
They survived the crash that wiped out thousands of other internet companies.
But surviving isn't enough for Bezos. Now that the financial crisis is averted, he wants to optimize the physical machine.
Which brings us into the mid-2000s, an era defined by algorithms, the cloud, and a radical restructuring of the company's culture.
Right. The financial crisis was averted, but the operational reality of Amazon was still incredibly messy, specifically the physical warehouses.
Yes, let's talk about the warehouse chaos. Because as the volume of orders exploded, the physical reality of moving those items became a nightmare.
They bring in Jeff Wilk to run global logistics, and Wilk brings in a former college buddy, a brilliant mathematician named Russell Algor.
They walk into these massive fulfillment centers, and it is a scene of absolute pandemonium. People are running everywhere. Items are constantly getting jammed on conveyor belts. The legacy software keeps crashing.
And Wilk points out to Algor the fundamental mathematical flaw in trying to run an Amazon warehouse like a Walmart warehouse.
It comes down to the complexity of the order profile.
If you are Walmart, your logistics are relatively predictable and homogeneous. You are shipping massive, identical pallets, say, 1,000 tubes of Crest toothpaste from a central distribution center to a physical retail store.
The store employees unpack the pallets, and the customers do the final sorting themselves by walking the aisles and putting items in their carts.
But Amazon doesn't have that luxury. Amazon has to pick, pack, and ship highly specific, individualized orders directly to residential homes.
And Wilk explains the combinatorics problem to Algor.
An Amazon customer might order a Britney Spears CD, a hammer, a specific brand of organic dog food, and a phone charger, and ask for it all to be gift-wrapped and shipped to Ohio.
The sheer mathematical number of possible combinations of items a single customer could order is near infinite.
Statistically speaking, that exact specific combination of items will never be ordered by anyone else ever again.
Hold on. So if every order is a unique snowflake, how do you program a machine to handle it?
That was the crisis. Legacy warehouse software, built by external vendors for traditional retail, relied on predictability. It wanted to know what was coming down the belt.
When a system can't predict, it creates bottlenecks.
A single oddly shaped plush toy getting stuck on a scanner ramp could literally halt the entire million-square-foot facility.
Wilk and Argor realized that buying off-the-shelf software was useless. They needed to completely rebuild the warehouse software from the ground up, entirely in-house, using proprietary predictive algorithms.
And this leads to the concept of chaotic storage, which is one of the most counterintuitive but brilliant things I learned from these sources.
Explain how chaotic storage works.
If you look at a traditional warehouse, it's organized logically for humans. All the books are in one aisle, all the electronics in another. All the blue toothbrushes are next to the red toothbrushes.
But Amazon's algorithms realized this was highly inefficient for pickers.
If a worker is looking for a blue toothbrush and it's surrounded by 50 other identically shaped toothbrushes of different colors, they have to slow down to ensure they grab the right one. It increases the error rate.
So what does the algorithm do?
It randomizes the storage based on complex routing mathematics. It tells the worker to put the blue toothbrush on a shelf right next to a Harry Potter book and a set of drill bits.
To a human, it looks like absolute chaos.
But the computer knows the exact XYZ coordinates of every single item. When an order comes in, the algorithm calculates the absolute most efficient, shortest walking path for the worker to grab those disparate items.
And because the blue toothbrush is next to a book, the worker grabs it instantly with zero hesitation because it's visually distinct.
They fire the external contractors, they bring all the engineering in-house, they build these massive learning algorithms to predict demand, routing, and inventory placement.
And the result of solving this massive math problem is staggering.
They cut the internal click-to-ship time, the metric of how long it takes from the moment you hit buy to the moment the physical box is loaded onto an outbound truck, from an average of 3 days down to just 4 hours.
That specific operational leap in physical efficiency is the hidden, necessary engine that powers Amazon's next massive consumer innovation, Amazon Prime.
Prime launches in 2005. You pay a flat yearly fee, and you get guaranteed unlimited 2-day shipping.
And Prime is widely considered by economists to be perhaps the greatest psychological lock-in mechanism ever invented in retail history.
Once a consumer pays that upfront sunk cost of a yearly fee, their psychology shifts. They feel compelled to maximize the value of that subscription.
They completely stop comparison shopping on other websites. If they need batteries, they don't go to the hardware store, they go to Amazon. If they need a spatula, they go to Amazon.
It creates an incredible, impenetrable moat around their customer base.
But to achieve the kind of rapid software innovation required to support Prime and the marketplace, Bezos also had to radically change how the company operated internally.
Right, the corporate restructuring. As the company grew, it was slowing down. So he introduces this famous management philosophy, the 2 pizza teams.
Bezos deeply hated corporate bureaucracy. He felt the company was getting bogged down in endless meetings, cross-departmental coordination, and consensus building.
So he decreed a new organizational structure. He mandated that no software development team should be larger than what could be comfortably fed by 2 large pizzas.
We're talking maybe 6 to 10 engineers maximum.
So he breaks this massive monolith into hundreds of decentralized, autonomous micro-units.
Exactly. These small teams were given total ownership over a specific feature or a specific micro-problem.
They didn't have to ask permission from upper management. They just had to deliver measurable results.
But the sources are very clear that this created a highly aggressive, almost Darwinian corporate culture.
These teams weren't just autonomous. They were often competing against each other for resources. It was brutal.
People were burning out. There was this constant suffocating pressure to perform or be replaced.
The internal vernacular of the time was telling. Employees would say, if you're bad, Jeff eats you alive. If you're good, he jumps on your back and rides you until you drop.
It wasn't a warm, fuzzy Silicon Valley campus with ping pong tables and nap pods. It was an elite, high-pressure, highly critical crucible.
But that intense pressure cooker environment actually birthed what is arguably Amazon's most important world-changing creation.
And the irony is, It had absolutely nothing to do with selling books or retail.
Yes. The birth of AWS, Amazon Web Services. I absolutely love this story because it doesn't start with a grand vision to conquer the internet. It starts with a guy literally trying to flee Jeff Bezos' micromanagement.
Chris Pinkham, an incredibly talented engineer who grew up in South Africa.
He basically goes to Bezos and asks to move back to Cape Town to work remotely, mostly just to get out of the intense Seattle pressure cooker.
And Bezos lets him go, but tasks him with solving a massive internal headache that was paralyzing the company.
Because Amazon's internal IT infrastructure was a complete nightmare at this point.
All these newly formed two pizza teams were moving fast, but they were constantly stepping on each other's toes. They were duplicating efforts, building their own redundant databases, and constantly fighting over server space.
It was digital chaos.
Every time a two pizza team wanted to launch a new feature, say a new recommendation algorithm, they had to formally requisition physical servers, wait weeks for them to be purchased, physically racked in a data center, configured and allocated.
It was taking weeks to do what should take minutes. Pinkham and his remote team in South Africa were tasked with building a unified, modular, scalable server architecture.
And this is where Bezos makes a technical mandate that changes the world. He forces a concept through the company regarding API's application programming interfaces.
Explain how this mechanism worked and why it was so revolutionary.
To understand APIs, think of a restaurant. When you go to a restaurant, you don't walk into the kitchen, find the chef, and tell him exactly how to cook your steak.
You interact with a standardized interface, the menu and the waiter. You give your request to the waiter takes it to the kitchen and brings you the food.
Bezos issued a mandate that all Amazon teams must expose their data and functionality to each other exclusively through standardized web interfaces' internal APIs.
No more backdoor access, no more custom integrations. Every team had to build a waiter for their digital kitchen.
So Pinkham's team builds this massive, undifferentiated pool of computing power and storage, and any internal Amazon team can just tap into it instantly via an API, taking exactly as much computing power as they need for exactly as long as they need it, without asking permission.
They built an internal utility cloud, but then the strategic light bulb goes off. Bezos and his lieutenant Andy Jassy realize, if this frictionless infrastructure solves our massive internal scaling problem, it solves every software company's problem.
Exactly. Think about it from the listener's perspective. If you wanted to start a tech company in 2003, you had to raise millions of dollars in venture capital just to buy the physical servers, to host your website, before you even knew if anyone wanted your product.
Amazon realizes they can simply rent out their massive modular computing architecture to the outside world. They can sell computing power and data storage the exact same way a utility company sells electricity.
You don't build your own power plant to light your house. You just plug into the grid and pay for exactly what you consume. AWS, Amazon Web Services, is born.
Let's marvel at the sheer irony of AWS for a second here. Think about your life today. Think about the last time you streamed a movie on Netflix, booked a vacation rental on Airbnb, or ordered a ride on Uber.
You felt like you were interacting with three distinct, innovative companies.
But beneath the surface, all of that data, all of those algorithms were running through the exact same Amazon servers we are talking about right now. It is wild to think that the invisible foundational backbone of the modern internet was basically born because Amazon's internal departments couldn't stop fighting over server space.
It is the ultimate happy accident born of strict operational necessity. Amazon solved a deeply boring, incredibly complex infrastructure problem for themselves, and in doing so, built a platform that enabled the entire Web 2.0 startup boom.
But critically, they kept it very quiet. They hid the revenue deep in their financial filings under other.
They didn't brag about it for years, allowing them to build a massive monopoly while their tech rivals were asleep at the wheel.
We will definitely return to the massive implications of AWS later. But right now, we have to shift gears. Because suddenly, Bezos isn't just worried about optimizing logistics or selling server space.
He's looking over his shoulder at Silicon Valley. Specifically, he is terrified of Apple.
The iPod absolutely terrified Jeff Bezos.
He sees Steve Jobs launch the iPod, and he realizes it's not just a cool music player. It represents a fundamental existential shift in how human beings consume media. Apple had successfully convinced the world to stop buying physical CDs and start buying digital tracks on the iTunes store.
And Bezos looks at his own balance sheet and realizes, if Apple does this to books, if they create an iPod for books, Amazon's core business is dead.
We have to remember that despite selling toys and electronics, books, CDs, and DVDs were still the foundation of Amazon's profit margins.
If all media goes digital, and Apple controls both the physical device in the customer's hand and the digital storefront, Amazon becomes completely obsolete.
Bezos realizes they cannot survive just being a retailer anymore. They have to design, manufacture, and control their own hardware to own the digital distribution pipeline.
This fear births Project Fiona, the top-secret hardware initiative that we eventually come to know as the Kindle.
And Bezos approaches this transition with absolute unyielding ruthlessness. The sources describe this incredibly tense meeting in New York in 2006 with the CEOs of the major publishing houses.
Bezos walks into the boardroom, slaps this ugly, blocky white prototype on the table, and basically tells them, books have had a good 500-year run since Gutenberg, but it's time for something new.
The publishers are naturally highly skeptical. Previous attempts at e-readers by other companies had failed miserably.
Reading long-form text on a glowing, backlit LCD computer screen was a terrible experience that caused eye strain, and there simply weren't enough digital books legally available to make buying a device worthwhile.
But Bezos explains the underlying hardware mechanics of e-ink technology, which was revolutionary at the time.
I found the physics of e-ink fascinating. Explain how it differs from a tablet screen.
A standard tablet uses a backlight pushing light through pixels into your eyes. E-ink is entirely different.
The screen contains millions of microscopic capsules filled with positively charged white pigments and negatively charged black pigments.
When an electrical field is applied, the ink physically moves to the surface of the screen to form the letters.
It reflects ambient light, just like real paper, meaning there is zero glare. You can read it in direct sunlight. And crucially, it only uses battery power when you turn the page. The battery could last for weeks.
And he coupled that hardware innovation with a massive friction remover. Free, built-in 3G cellular data.
You didn't need to plug the Kindle into a computer to sync it like an early iPod. You could be sitting on a beach, hear about a book, click buy, and have it downloaded in 60 seconds.
It was a brilliant consumer experience.
Yeah.
But, as Bezos knew, the hardware is just a useless brick without the actual content.
So he looks at these powerful New York publishers and demands that they fully digitize 100,000 of their most popular titles in the next 12 months.
And this is where we really see the sharp edge of Amazon's market power. The texts detail how Bezos didn't just ask politely.
When publishers pushed back, worried about digital piracy and cannibalizing physical sales, he deployed highly aggressive tactics.
The sources mention an internal program allegedly called Project Gazelle, the operating theory being that Amazon should approach small, vulnerable publishers the way a cheetah approaches a sickly gazelle.
They leveraged their monopsony power. A monopoly is when there is only one seller. A monopsony is when a company is the dominant buyer in a market.
Amazon was responsible for such a massive percentage of a publisher's sales that they could dictate terms.
If a publisher didn't comply with the digitization demands, their physical books would mysteriously lose their promotional discounts on Amazon, or their crucial buy now buttons would inexplicably disappear, replaced by a slower, available from third parties option. Sales would plummet overnight.
He effectively forced the entire publishing industry to digitize on his timeline, and then he dropped the hammer on pricing.
When the Kindle launched, he universally priced the hottest new bestsellers and New York Times blockbusters at $9.99 for the digital ebook.
Which sent shockwaves through the industry, because Amazon was actually paying the publishers the wholesale equivalent of a physical book, maybe $14 or $15, for that digital file.
Wait, so he was intentionally taking a $5 loss on every single digital bestseller sold?
Exactly. It was get big fast, reincarnated, and applied to a specific product category.
He was willing to bleed hundreds of millions of dollars in losses just to permanently anchor the consumer's expectation that ebooks should cost $9.99 and to make the Kindle an absolute necessity.
He subsidized the creation of the digital reading market to ensure Apple couldn't take it. Take the loss now, own the ecosystem forever.
And it worked brilliantly. The Kindle was a massive triumph that fundamentally revolutionized reading.
But psychologically, this massive success gave Bezos a level of supreme confidence in his own hardware intuition that eventually led directly to his most humiliating public disaster.
Oh boy, we have to talk about the Fire Phone.
Let's fast forward a few years to 2014. Apple dominates with the iPhone. Google has captured the rest of the market with Android.
Bezos, flush with the success of the Kindle, decides Amazon needs its own flagship smartphone.
And they hold this massive, theatrical, flashy press event in Seattle. Bezos is up on stage, wearing a dark shirt, pacing around, totally doing his best Steve Jobs impression.
But he profoundly misread the smartphone market. Instead of building a highly practical, affordable phone that deeply integrated with Amazon Prime, which is what Amazon was famous for, providing immense value and utility, he insisted from the top down on building a high-end luxury device centered around a visual gimmick.
The feature was called dynamic perspective.
Yes. The phone had 4 specialized infrared cameras on the front corners that constantly tracked the user's head and eye movements to create a parallax 3D effect on the screen.
So if you physically tilted the phone, you could theoretically look around objects rendered on the display.
Which is kind of neat for about 5 seconds when you were playing with it in a store, but completely, utterly useless in daily life.
Nobody needed to look at a 3D rendering of a pyramid on their lock screen. And to make matters worse, it was expensive. They priced it at $650, putting it in direct competition with the iPhone.
The tech press absolutely tore it apart. It was a catastrophic retail failure.
The sources note they ended up with roughly 80 million unsold units sitting dead in warehouses, resulting in a humiliating $200 million write-down for the company.
It was a very public, very painful defeat. And structurally, it highlighted the danger of a CEO becoming so powerful and so trusted internally that nobody in the development room is willing to stand up and tell him his pet idea is flawed.
But, and this is the craziest pivot in the entire timeline, right around the exact same time the Fire Phone is failing, Amazon is secretly working on another hardware project that sounds so bizarre it almost reads like a comedy sketch.
Let's jump to Boston, 2013. The police raid an apartment complex because the neighbors have called it in.
They suspect it's a drug den or some kind of illegal ring because all these strange people keep going in and out at all hours, muttering to themselves. The cops burst in with guns drawn.
And what do the police find? An entirely empty apartment filled with high-end microphones on stands and a temp worker sitting in a chair being paid $15 an hour to read random phrases off a clipboard.
What's the weather? Play some Beatles. Set a timer for 10 minutes.
It was an Amazon Black Ops acoustic testing site.
They had quietly rented apartments all over the country under strict secrecy to gather raw acoustic data. They needed to rigorously map how human voices bounced off walls, absorbed into couches, and echoed in empty rooms.
Because Bezos had a new, wildly ambitious vision, inspired by the ubiquitous, invisible computer on the Starship Enterprise in Star Trek, he wanted to build what he described as a talking Coke can.
A screenless cylinder that you place in your kitchen that could accurately answer questions from across a noisy room using advanced far-field voice recognition.
And the texts reveal that internally, almost everyone hated the idea. The engineers thought it was physically impossible.
The audio experts explained the physics of sound, that far-field voice recognition wouldn't work reliably in a chaotic home environment with TVs playing and dogs barking.
At one point, the early prototypes of the voice assistant, which they eventually named Alexa, were so frustratingly bad at understanding commands that Bezos reportedly screamed at the device during a test and told the engineering team to put a bullet in its head.
But despite his own frustration, he didn't cancel it. He gave them more resources. They kept refining the machine learning AI, feeding it millions of hours of that secret acoustic data gathered from the Boston apartments to train it to isolate the specific wake word from background reverberations.
And when they finally launched the Amazon Echo in late 2014, they did it with zero fanfare, no big stage presentation, just a quiet, invite-only release to select Prime members.
And it absolutely exploded. People loved it.
It felt like living in the future. You just speak into the ether of your kitchen and it answers.
Okay, but here's my question for you, because this psychological contrast is giving me whiplash. How does the exact same guy who fundamentally misunderstood what consumers wanted with a flashy 3D phone turn around and perfectly predict that millions of people would want a listening cylinder in their most private spaces?
It is a profound question about product design, and it comes down to the fundamental difference between a gimmick and a friction remover.
The Fire Phone's 3D screen added friction. It was a neat trick that drained battery life and didn't solve any real human problem.
The Echo, on the other hand, removed friction entirely. You didn't even have to pull a device out of your pocket, unlock a screen, or open an app to set a pasta timer, play a song, or eventually reorder paper towels from Amazon.
Bezos has historically always succeeded when he completely eliminates the barriers between the customer and their immediate desire.
The Echo was the ultimate frictionless interface. And by launching it when they did, Amazon beat Google and Apple to the smart home market by years. Incredible. So by 2014, Amazon is firing on all cylinders. The e-commerce machine is unstoppable, Prime has locked in the consumers, Kindle owns reading, Alexa owns the smart home, and AWS owns the internet's backend.
Which brings us to the era of the global leviathan and political crosshairs, 2014 to 2018. The sheer scale of the company is about to break containment and spill into geopolitics.
Right. And the realization of how powerful they have truly become hits the broader tech world like an earthquake in 2014, specifically regarding AWS.
Let's go to the cinematic scene in the sources. We are in a highly secure AWS facility in Northern Virginia. It's hidden in the woods, unmarked, and heavily guarded.
Andy Jassy, the executive who runs AWS, is giving a very rare classified tour to Doug Wolf, who is the technology chief of the CIA.
The physical security is straight out of a spy thriller. They have biometric iris scanners to get through doors. Armed guards patrolling the server floors.
Jassy shows the CIA chief a specialized machine whose sole dedicated purpose is to physically shred hard drives into tiny, unrecoverable metal flakes, the absolute millisecond they show any sign of mechanical failure, ensuring data integrity.
And Jassy turns to the CIA tech chief and says, "Forget physical roads or national power grids. This is the infrastructure of the 21st century." And he was dead right.
Amazon wins a massive $600 million contract to host the CIA's highly classified data in the cloud.
And this government deal is a massive wake-up call for the entire tech industry. Because shortly after this, Amazon finally breaks out the specific revenue numbers for AWS in their quarterly earnings report.
When the numbers drop, Silicon Valley gasps. AWS was making billions of dollars in revenue with massive software-like profit margins.
Google and Microsoft executives suddenly realized that Amazon, a company they dismiss as an online strip mall, had quietly built a highly lucrative foundational monopoly right under their noses. It completely revolutionized the financial valuation of the company.
But while the cloud computing business is soaring into the stratosphere, the core retail business suddenly faces a new existential threat. And it's not coming from Silicon Valley startups or Walmart. It's coming from China.
Right. Let's look at the supply chain economics here. Up until this point, the global retail model was relatively simple. Western brands designed goods, manufactured them cheaply in Chinese factories, shipped them in containers to the US, and sold them on Amazon or in malls with a massive markup.
An Abercrombie & Fitch winter jacket might cost $9 to physically manufacture in Shenzhen, but they sell it for $150 in the States.
But the sources detail a crucial trip where Amazon executives take a tour of a manufacturing facility in Shenzhen, and the factory boss shows them a special cordoned-off section of the floor where workers are sewing the exact same high-quality jackets, just without the Abercrombie logo stitched on the front.
It's called white labeling, and the factory boss tells the Amazon executives, "We are selling these unprinted jackets directly to American consumers online for $30 using a new drop shipping platform called Wish.com.
This is a direct structural threat to Amazon's core model. If Chinese manufacturers figure out how to completely bypass the Western brands and sell directly to the end consumer, Amazon becomes the expensive, obsolete middleman. So how does Amazon respond? Aggressively. They open their third-party marketplace directly to the Chinese manufacturers.
Which fundamentally and permanently changes the Amazon consumer experience. Suddenly, the site is flooded with incredibly cheap, direct-from-factory goods.
But because the volume is so massive, it's also flooded with obscure, unpronounceable no-name brands, counterfeit items, and sometimes genuinely dangerous products like hoverboards with exploding batteries or unregulated supplements.
The underlying algorithm was designed to prioritize low prices and high availability, and the human oversight team simply struggled to keep up with the sheer deluge of international listings.
It's the ultimate double-edged sword of building the everything store. They successfully neutralized the threat from Wish.com by winning the volume war, but in doing so, they sacrificed a degree of quality control and the implicit trust of the consumer. The algorithm was running the show, optimizing for transactions over curation.
And as the company's influence touches every aspect of the economy, Jeff Bezos himself steps out of the quiet corporate shadows and enters the highly volatile political arena.
In 2013, he makes a personal purchase that changes his public profile forever. He buys the Washington Post for $250 million.
He states he wants to use his tech expertise to save a vital democratic institution and ensure its financial stability. But owning a major newspaper puts him directly in the crosshairs of a very prominent political figure.
Yes. The texts deeply explore the era during the 2016 campaign and subsequent presidency, where Donald Trump repeatedly and publicly attacks Jeff Bezos on Twitter.
And let's be very clear and impartial here, as we are just reporting the complex web of political friction outlined in the biographical sources.
The texts state that President Trump tweeted accusations that Amazon was operating as a no-tax monopoly and using the U.S. Postal Service as its subsidized delivery boy.
Simultaneously, Trump heavily criticized the Washington Post's aggressive investigative fact-checking of his campaign and administration, publicly suggesting that Bezos only bought the paper to act as a lobbying tool to keep Amazon's taxes low and avoid antitrust scrutiny.
Our goal here isn't to litigate the absolute validity of those political claims, but to highlight how Amazon's sheer inescapable scale inherently transformed its CEO from a nerdy tech founder into a geopolitical lightning rod.
Bezos initially responded to the attacks with a snarky tweet of his own, jokingly offering to reserve Trump a seat on one of his space rockets with the hashtag #SendDonaldToSpace.
But the feud quickly escalated past jokes, turning Bezos into a highly polarizing figure on the national stage.
He's no longer just the guy who sells you books. He's a billionaire media mogul feuding with the leader of the free world. And simultaneously, he's also going Hollywood.
Let's talk about the cultural shift, specifically the Beverly Hills premiere of the movie Manchester by the Sea.
Amazon Studios had started producing original film and television content. They didn't just want to distribute media, they wanted prestige, they wanted Oscars, and they win them for Manchester by the Sea.
Bezos loves this new world. He's at this glamorous Hollywood party, mingling with Matt Damon and studio power brokers.
And this is the specific event where he is introduced to Lauren Sanchez, a charismatic television host and helicopter pilot.
This seemingly innocuous social meeting sets off a chain of events that will eventually turn his tightly controlled personal life upside down.
But while he's rubbing elbows on the red carpet in Hollywood back in the corporate world, Amazon commits a massive, completely unforced PR error, the HQ2 disaster.
Amazon announced they were looking for a city to build a second, massive corporate headquarters, HQ2, promising to bring 50,000 high-paying tech jobs to the winner.
But rather than quietly scouting locations, they turned it into a highly publicized, undignified reality show. Cities across North America literally begged and debased themselves to win the bid.
It was incredibly absurd to watch. The sources note that a city in Georgia legally offered to change its name to Amazon.
The city of Tucson, Arizona, loaded a 21-foot-tall giant saguaro cactus onto a flatbed truck and tried to deliver it to Bezos in Seattle as a tribute gift.
But the hubris backfired. When Amazon ultimately chose Long Island City in New York, having negotiated promises of nearly $3 billion in tax breaks from the state, the local backlash was swift and brutal.
Local politicians, union leaders, and community groups revolted. They protested the impending gentrification, the strain on the subway infrastructure, and the core ideological idea of handing billions of taxpayer dollars to one of the richest, most valuable corporations on planet Earth.
The grassroots resistance was so fiercely organized that Amazon, shocked by the bad PR, actually took their ball and went home. They canceled the New York plans entirely.
It's a staggering moment of realization for the company.
Let me reflect on this paradox of scale for a moment. It's the ultimate double-edged sword of success. You spend 2 decades building a machine so incredibly big and powerful that it can produce Oscar-winning movies and safely host the CIA's most classified data, but suddenly that exact same size makes you the villain of every local zoning board and union meeting in America.
When you are a small startup, you are celebrated as a scrappy disruptor. When you become a trillion-dollar leviathan, you become the establishment.
And society naturally resists the establishment, especially one that fundamentally alters local housing markets and extracts massive tax incentives.
Bezos was realizing, perhaps too late, that brilliant algorithms and supply chain logic cannot solve messy human political and social resentment.
Which perfectly transitions us to the final era of our deep dive. Scandals, space, and the future. We're looking at the 2018 to 2025 timeline.
And that political resentment we just talked about converges with his personal life in a deeply shocking, unprecedented way. The National Enquirer scandal.
In late 2018, Michael Sanchez, the brother of Lauren Sanchez, whom Bezos had met at that Hollywood party, meets with executives from the National Enquirer tabloid.
And he sells them a trove of incredibly intimate, highly private text messages and photographs between his sister and Jeff Bezos, definitively proving they're carrying on a secret affair.
And the sources detail that Sanchez even tries to sell them what he claims is an explicit nude photograph of Bezos, which ironically turns out to be a completely fake photo of someone else pulled from a dating site.
But the romantic text messages and the other photographs are very real. The Inquirer publishes the explosive story in early 2019.
For Jeff Bezos, a deeply private, highly analytical man who had tightly, almost obsessively controlled his public image for 25 years, this is an absolute nightmare scenario.
His 25-year marriage to Mackenzie, who was there in the Chevy Blazer driving to Seattle, ends in a highly publicized, multi-billion-dollar divorce.
But rather than hide in shame or pay hush money, Bezos does something highly unusual for a corporate CEO. He goes aggressively on the offensive.
He publishes an astonishing open letter on the internet directly accusing the Inquirer's publisher, AMI, of criminal extortion and blackmail.
And the biographical sources point out the deeper, much darker geopolitical suspicion swirling around this leak. Again, we are just reporting the claims investigated in the texts. The National Enquirer's publisher was known to be politically friendly with Donald Trump, who was actively feuding with Bezos.
Furthermore, Bezos's private security team and later independent UN digital investigators found forensic evidence leading to suspicions that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman might have been directly involved in hacking Bezos's personal phone via a malicious video file sent over WhatsApp.
The alleged motive: retaliation for the Washington Post's relentless coverage of the assassination of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
The layers of geopolitical intrigue are absolutely staggering when you step back and look at it.
The CEO of a company that started by selling paperback books out of a garage is suddenly dealing with international cyber espionage, presidential feuds, and tabloid extortion plots involving foreign heads of state.
It conclusively proves that Amazon's sprawling power has elevated Bezos into a massive, vulnerable target on the global stage.
But amidst all this terrestrial chaos, the divorces, the politics, the antitrust hearings, where does Bezos actually look? He looks up to the space race. We go to July 2021, the desolate West Texas desert.
This launch is the culmination of a childhood obsession. Bezos had actually founded his private space company, Blue Origin, way back in the year 2000, keeping it highly secretive for years while Amazon grew.
But now he's in a highly public, deeply personal, billionaire space race with Elon Musk's SpaceX.
He physically climbs into the capsule of the New Shepard rocket, and the crew he assembled is incredibly symbolic.
It's Jeff, his brother Mark, an 82-year-old female aviation pioneer named Wally Funk, who was denied the chance to go to space in the 1960s, and an 18-year-old Dutch student named Oliver Damon.
They blast off, accelerate past the Kármán line, the internationally recognized 62-mile boundary of space experience, a few minutes of weightlessness, and parachute safely back down to the desert floor.
It was a 10-minute suborbital flight, but symbolically, it represented a massive, permanent transition in his life. Because just days before climbing into that rocket, Jeff Bezos officially stepped down as the CEO of Amazon.
After 27 grueling years at the helm, he hands the absolute control of the empire over to Andy Jassy, the pragmatic, detail-oriented executive who built AWS into a cash cow.
And Jassy inherits a completely different, much harsher macroeconomic landscape. The massive, unprecedented boom in e-commerce caused by the pandemic starts to aggressively cool off.
Global inflation hits, interest rates spike. Jassy, who operates with incredible financial rigor, brings back the era of austerity.
He initiates massive corporate layoffs, letting tens of thousands of employees go. He ruthlessly shuts down peripheral, speculative hardware projects.
He scales back the podcast network Wondery. He forces the lavish Prime Video division to focus on actual profitability rather than just chasing prestige awards.
It is definitively the end of the blank check, get big fast era at Amazon.
Meanwhile, Bezos is off living the post-CEO, billionaire lifestyle, commissioning massive super yachts, hanging out with celebrities, and focusing his energy on Blue Origin.
But Amazon itself, under Jassy, still has massive world-altering ambitions. Which brings us to the final scene outlined in our sources. It's 2025, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Project Kuiper.
Project Kuiper is Amazon's staggering $10 billion bet to build their own satellite internet constellation in low Earth orbit, designed to compete directly head-to-head with Elon Musk's Starlink.
The engineering plan is to launch over 3,000 satellites to blanket the globe and provide high-speed broadband to remote areas.
The corporate logic is circular and brilliant. If Amazon provides fast, cheap internet to the developing world, those new internet users will inevitably use AWS servers, stream movies on Prime Video, and buy physical goods on the Amazon marketplace.
It's building the ultimate infrastructure. But there is a massive catch. They are years behind SpaceX in deployment.
And they are under such a strict regulatory time crunch from the FCC to get these satellites into orbit that they have to scramble to buy heavy lift launch capacity from literally any aerospace company they can find.
Including their biggest, most bitter rival.
Yeah.
They're literally paying to put Amazon's proprietary satellites on top of Elon Musk's SpaceX Falcon rockets.
It is the ultimate, purely pragmatic business decision, stripped of all ego.
So let me ask you this, as our expert, to tie this all together. Is it a sign of Amazon's ultimate calculating pragmatism that they will literally stroke a massive check to their biggest billionaire rival just to launch their rockets? Or is it a sign that, for the first time in their history, the Amazon machine is finally behind the technological curve?
I think the evidence suggests it's both. It is deeply pragmatic. The underlying algorithm of Amazon's corporate brain dictates that you always use the most efficient, cost-effective delivery method available, even if that delivery truck happens to be a rocket owned by your rival. They don't let pride stop progress. But it also starkly highlights that in the new orbital hardware space race, they entirely missed the first-mover advantage. They are reacting to Musk's infrastructure rather than inventing it. It shows that even a $2 trillion Leviathan has limits to its agility.
Which brings us to the end of this incredible, sprawling timeline. From a guy tweaking an Excel spreadsheet in the passenger seat of a Chevy Blazer to a network of 3,000 satellites orbiting the Earth. We asked you at the very beginning of this deep dive to look around your room and find that Amazon box or that smart speaker.
The next time you see one, realize the scale of what you are looking at.
Every single time you click Buy Now, you aren't just making a simple transaction. You are interacting with this impossibly vast, algorithm-driven machine.
A machine that ruthlessly reshaped retail logistics, broke the traditional publishing industry, birthed the infrastructure of the cloud, survived the dot-com crash, and made its founder one of the richest men in human history.
It stands as a monolithic monument to what happens when you combine relentless, quantitative, long-term vision with the exponential power of the Internet's growth curve.
Absolutely.
But it leaves us with one final, lingering question to ponder as we sign off. Now that the obsessive, micromanaging, mathematically driven founder has officially left the building to focus on the stars and his super yachts, can a company of Amazon's sheer monolithic size actually remain innovative?
Or has it simply become an unstoppable algorithm running on autopilot, too big and too profitable to ever fail, but perhaps, finally, too big to invent the next big thing?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question that Andy Jassy has to answer.
We'll have to see.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for joining us on this adventure. Until next time, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it and keep seeking the extraordinary.